The alien warrior was seconds away from victory. Her enemies were already falling. Her blades moved faster than human eyes could follow. The ground around her was covered with broken machines and defeated soldiers. Then something impossible happened. In the middle of the battle, she closed her eyes. Not for a blink. Not from pain. She simply stood there, calm, silent, and closed her eyes as if she had already accepted death. Across the battlefield, both humans and aliens froze in confusion. Because everyone watching knew one thing. If she stopped fighting for even 1 second, she would die. But what happened next would become one of the most unbelievable moments in human history. The siege of Aelio's Ridge. The battle for Aelio's Ridge had lasted 4 days. The planet Talvira was dry and cold, covered in endless grey stone valleys and strange silver plants that shimmered under the twin suns. Humans had built a small outpost there 5 years earlier. It was supposed to be peaceful. Then the Zerati Empire arrived. The Zerati were warriors who believed strength decided everything. They conquered worlds quickly, crushing civilizations that could not defend themselves. And now Talvira was next. Commander Marcus Hale watched the battlefield from behind a broken defense wall. Dust filled the air. Explosions shook the ground. Human drones fought desperately above the valley while Zerati ships hovered like silent predators in the sky. Marcus wiped sweat from his eyes. "This is bad," said Lieutenant Aisha Karim, crouched beside him with a rifle. Marcus nodded. "Our defense line won't hold another hour." Human forces were smaller. Their weapons were weaker. The Zerati had stronger armor, faster ships, and soldiers trained from childhood to fight. And among them was someone even more terrifying. The Zerati champion. The alien who fought like a storm. Her name was Verexil. She was tall and powerful, with deep crimson skin and glowing silver eyes. 2 curved blades extended from her armored gauntlets like shining claws. Every movement she made was precise, elegant, deadly. Zerati warriors respected strength above all things, and Verexil had defeated hundreds in ritual combat before becoming their champion. When she entered battle, victory usually followed. Now she moved through the battlefield like a storm. Human drones exploded around her. Armored vehicles collapsed under her attacks. Even experienced soldiers struggled to slow her down. Marcus watched through his tactical visor. "She's tearing through everything." Aisha cursed quietly. "Is there anything that can stop her?" Marcus didn't answer. Because he already knew the truth. Probably not. Humanity's quiet weapon. But humanity had something the Zerati did not understand. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest. But humans were creative. Behind the defense line, a small team worked desperately inside a mobile laboratory. Dr. Elias Navarro, a thin scientist with messy hair and tired eyes, stared at dozens of holographic screens. His assistant Mai tapped quickly on a console. "The neural signal pattern is ready," she said. Navarro nodded slowly. "Good. If our theory is right." He paused. This might actually work. Human intelligence had discovered something strange about the Zerati. Their warriors relied heavily on neural combat instincts, powerful reflex systems that predicted enemy movement. It made them terrifying fighters. But it also meant their brains processed enormous amounts of battlefield data. Navarro believed that could be used against them. If a signal overloaded those instincts for just a moment, even the strongest warrior could be disrupted. The problem? It had never been tested in real combat. Mai looked nervous. "Doctor, if this fails?" Navarro sighed. "Then Aelio's Ridge falls." A dangerous decision. Back on the battlefield, Marcus watched Verexil destroy another defense turret. The champion moved closer to the command position. Too close. Aisha checked her ammo. "Commander, she's heading right toward us." Marcus activated his communicator. "Navarro, status." Static filled the line. Then the scientist's voice answered. "Signal prototype ready." Marcus hesitated. "Will it stop her?" A pause. Navarro answered honestly. I have no idea. Marcus looked at the battlefield again. The Zerati champion walked forward through smoke and fire, unstoppable. He exhaled slowly. Do it. The moment that changed everything. Navarro activated the device. A pulse of invisible energy spread across the battlefield. No explosions. No bright lights. Just a silent wave moving through the air. Verexil suddenly stopped. Her blades lowered. Her breathing slowed. Marcus frowned. What? The alien warrior lifted her head slightly. Then something strange happened. She closed her eyes. Across the battlefield, soldiers stared in disbelief. Aisha whispered, "Did we knock her out?" Marcus shook his head slowly. No. Verexil was still standing. Perfectly balanced. Perfectly calm. But her eyes remained closed. Seconds passed. The battlefield became strangely quiet. Even Zerati warriors hesitated, confused by their champion's sudden stillness. Marcus spoke quietly. What is she doing? No one had an answer. The truth no one expected. Inside her mind, Verexil felt something unfamiliar. Silence. For the first time in years, the constant storm of battle predictions inside her brain had disappeared. The human signal had disrupted her combat instincts. But instead of panic, she felt peace. Zerati warriors had always relied on their instinct systems. Without them, most soldiers would freeze. But Verexil was different. She had trained beyond instinct. Beyond reflex. She had trained her mind. And now, with the battlefield quiet inside her thoughts, she understood something incredible. Humans had not tried to kill her. They had tried to confuse her. Which meant one thing. Humans were thinking. Adapting. Evolving. Slowly, Verexil smiled. Then she opened her eyes. But what she did next shocked everyone. Because instead of attacking, she dropped her weapons. The battlefield holds its breath. Marcus stared through his visor in disbelief. Did she just? Aisha finished the sentence. Surrender. Across the battlefield, Zerati soldiers stood frozen. Their champion had never surrendered. Not once. But Verexil raised her empty hands and spoke loudly in the universal language used between spacefaring civilizations. Humans of Talvira, she said calmly. You fight with intelligence, not just strength. Her silver eyes scanned the battlefield. And that makes you dangerous. Marcus slowly stepped forward. Blaster ready. What are you saying? The alien warrior looked directly at him. I am saying. She paused. That the Zerati Empire has underestimated humanity. And far above the battlefield, a massive Zerati warship suddenly began descending toward Aelio's ridge. Something much bigger was about to begin. And Verexil knew it. The warship came down through the pale sky like a falling city. Its shadow swallowed the ridge, the broken walls, the burning vehicles, and the exhausted men and women who had been certain they were about to die. Human soldiers lifted their weapons, but many of them already knew the truth. If that ship opened fire, Aelio's ridge would vanish in seconds. Marcus Hale did not look at the ship first. He looked at Verexil. She still stood in the open with her weapons on the ground, her silver eyes calm, her expression unreadable. Around her, Zerati soldiers waited in visible confusion. They had been raised to obey strength. They had also been raised to believe that their champion was strength itself. So when she stopped, they stopped. When she spoke, none of them dared interrupt. Aisha moved closer to Marcus and kept her rifle aimed at Verexil's chest. This feels like a trap, she said. It might be, Marcus answered. Verexil heard him. If I wanted you dead, human commander, I would not have dropped my blades. That depends, Marcus said. Maybe you think the ship can finish the work. Verexil turned her head toward the descending warship. For the first time since anyone had seen her, something cold passed across her face. That ship is not here to save your people, she said. It is here to save mine. Marcus frowned. From us. No, Verexil said. From the truth. The warship stopped above the ridge with a deep mechanical hum that seemed to press against every bone in the human body. A circular hatch opened in its underside. A column of white light fell to the ground, and from it descended a tall figure in black command armor edged with gold. Supreme Marshal Kale Seren. Even the Zerati soldiers lowered their heads. Seren was older than Verexil, broad-shouldered, hard-faced, and terrifying in a quieter way. He did not move like a warrior trying to prove himself. He moved like a man who had already decided what everyone else was worth. He stepped onto the battlefield and looked first at Verexil's discarded blades. Then at the humans. Then back at Verexil. You shame the Empire, he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the valley. Verexil did not lower her eyes. I preserve it. A few Zerati soldiers shifted uneasily. Marcus could feel the tension changing shape. This was no longer a battle line. It was something more dangerous. A crack inside the enemy itself. Seren took one step forward. You were sent to break these primitives. Verexil's gaze sharpened. And yet they remain unbroken. They are weak, Seren said. Marcus almost laughed at that. Behind him, half the human defenses were destroyed, and most of his people had not slept properly in days. Weak was not the word he would have chosen. But Verexil gave a different answer. No, she said. They are adaptive. Seren's eyes narrowed. You sound impressed. I am. That single word changed the whole battlefield. Humans stared. Zerati soldiers stared harder. In an empire built on pride, respect for an enemy was dangerous. Open admiration was almost treason. Seren's hand moved toward the sidearm at his waist. The neural silence. That is what they did to you. Verexil nodded once. Yes. And it frightened you. It awakened me. Now even Marcus felt the shock of that answer. He could see Navarro emerging from behind the mobile lab unit farther down the ridge, still holding his tablet like a shield. The scientist looked as if he could not decide whether to be proud or terrified. Seren looked at the human lines with disgust. Then your judgment is compromised. Verexil took one step toward him. No. My judgment is clear for the first time. The Marshal's armor emitted a low pulse. Tiny drones rose from compartments along his back and began circling him like black metal insects. Human soldiers tightened their grip on their rifles. Zerati troops backed away, sensing what came next. Marcus leaned toward Aisha. If they fight each other, do not shoot unless we must. Aisha blinked. You're serious. We've been losing all week, Marcus said. I'm suddenly open to new experiences. Seren drew his sidearm, but it was no simple pistol. It extended into a long energy spear, humming with violent blue light. He pointed it at Verexil. You were bred to embody Zerati supremacy, he said. Instead you kneel before lesser minds. Verexil's expression hardened. No. I refuse blindness. Then she did something that made Marcus understand why the enemy feared her. She closed her eyes again. Aisha inhaled sharply. Several human soldiers muttered in alarm. But this time Marcus watched more carefully. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders relaxed. She was not retreating from the battle. She was entering it more deeply. When Seren attacked, he moved like a thunderbolt. The spear came down in a screaming arc that would have split a human in half. Verexil leaned aside at the last possible instant, still with her eyes closed. The spear hit stone and melted it. Before Seren could recover, she stepped inside his reach and struck him once with the edge of her palm. The blow landed beneath his armored chest plate with enough force to send him sliding backward across the dust. No one on either side spoke. The drones around Seren opened fire. Thin beams of light stabbed toward Verexil. She moved through them as if she could hear their path before they were born. She did not look. She did not need to. She twisted, lowered herself, turned, and every beam missed by the width of a finger. Marcus felt his disbelief turning into something else. Understanding. The human device had not crippled her. It had removed dependence. The Zerati fought through prediction machines built into mind and muscle. Humans fought through instinct, improvisation, emotion, error, recovery, and stubbornness. Their messiness had always looked primitive to a species obsessed with perfect systems. But now Verexil was fighting without the system. And in that silence, she was learning the oldest human talent of all: how to adapt in chaos. Seren rose with a roar and drove forward again. Verexil opened her eyes at last, and they were different now. Not softer, sharper, more alive. She snatched one of the fallen spear fragments from the ground and used it like a knife, turning his weapon aside, redirecting force instead of matching it. It was not Zerati technique. Marcus recognized it from old human close combat training. Economy, leverage, timing. Navarro whispered from somewhere behind him, "She's copying us." "Not copying," Marcus said quietly. "Learning." Seren attacked in rage now, and rage made him slower. Verexil moved around him with impossible calm. She let him strike where she had just been. She used his size against him. She drew him across broken terrain and into the shallow crater left by a destroyed turret. When his footing slipped for half a second, she trapped his spear arm, twisted, and slammed him down into the stone hard enough to crack both armor and ground. The battlefield erupted. Some human soldiers cheered before remembering they were cheering for an alien. Zerati soldiers stared in open horror. Verexil stood over the fallen marshal, chest rising, face set like iron. Seren tried to rise. She put one foot on the spear and pinned it to the stone. "This war ends here," she said. He laughed through blood. "You think they will accept you? You stood with prey." Verexil's voice dropped lower. "No. I stood with possibility." Then the warship above them changed. Its underside opened wider. Not for troops. For annihilation cannons. Marcus looked up and felt the blood drain from his face. "Everyone down." But Verexil was already turning toward the sky, and for the first time since she had entered the human's world, real urgency broke through her calm. "The Marshal never came to negotiate," she said. Marcus followed her gaze and understood. Seren had expected to lose. And he had brought the ship to erase every witness. Human. Zerati. All of them. The sky began to glow. The sky above Aelio's ridge began to glow like a second sun. The Zerati warship's annihilation cannons opened slowly, massive rings of dark metal sliding apart as energy gathered inside them. The air vibrated with a deep, terrifying hum that rolled across the battlefield like distant thunder. Everyone understood what it meant. This was not an attack. It was erasure. The kind of weapon used when an empire decided that a place, a battle, and every witness involved in it had become inconvenient. Marcus Hale felt the ground shake beneath his boots. "Navarro!" he shouted through the comms. "How long before that thing fires?" The scientist's voice came back thin and tight. 30 seconds, maybe less. Aisha looked up at the growing light in the sky. "We can't outrun that." "No," Marcus said quietly. "They couldn't. Even if every human soldier ran now, the blast would swallow the entire valley. The Zerati ship had come prepared to wipe out everything. But Verexil wasn't looking at the soldiers. She was looking at the humans. And something inside her expression had changed. For most of her life, Zerati warriors had been taught one truth: strength ruled the galaxy. Power conquered. Weakness vanished. But over the last hour, humanity had shown her something her empire had never understood. Creativity. Humans had survived the impossible not because they were stronger, but because they refused to think in straight lines. Verexil turned to Marcus. "You still have the signal device." Marcus blinked. "The neural disruptor." "Yes." Navarro's voice cut in nervously. "Commander, that pulse only affects Zerati neural instincts. It won't stop a warship." Verexil shook her head. "I know." She pointed toward the warship above. Zerati ships are controlled by neural battle links. The command crew connects their minds to the weapon systems. It lets them react faster than any machine. Marcus began to understand. You're saying if we fire the pulse again, the crew controlling the cannons will lose their instincts for a moment, Verexil finished. Navarro hesitated. That might interrupt the firing sequence. Aisha looked between them. Might. Navarro swallowed. Yes. Marcus laughed once, short and tired. Great. Another plan built on might. He looked at the glowing warship. 20 seconds. Do it. A human idea. Inside the mobile lab, Navarro's hands flew across the console. Signal amplifier online, redirecting power, increasing pulse radius. The device hummed louder as energy flowed into it. Mai stared at the readings. Doctor, if we push it any further, the system will overload. Navarro nodded. I know. But if it explodes? It won't matter, Navarro said quietly. Because if that ship fires, none of us will be alive anyway. He activated the final sequence. Outside, Marcus watched Verexil pick up one of Seren's broken spear fragments. What are you doing? He asked. Preparing. For what? Verexil looked up at the warship. For the moment your species creates. Marcus had no idea what that meant, but he trusted the tone in her voice. The pulse. Navarro slammed his hand onto the console. Now. The disruptor released a massive invisible wave that raced across the valley and climbed toward the sky. Inside the Zerati warship, dozens of Neuralinked officers suddenly gasped as their combat instincts collapsed into silence. For half a second, the weapon systems hesitated. Energy destabilized. Target locks flickered. Down below, Verexil moved. She ran forward with explosive speed, using shattered vehicles and broken stone as steps, climbing toward the ridge's highest rock formation. Marcus shouted after her. What are you doing? But she did not answer. The impossible leap. At the top of the ridge, the world seemed to pause. The warship loomed overhead like a metal mountain. The annihilation cannons flickered as the crew struggled to regain control. And Verexil jumped. For a heartbeat, gravity seemed to forget its rules. Her body soared through the air, propelled by strength far beyond human limits. She landed on a protruding section of the warship's lower hull with a thunderous impact. Inside the valley, humans stared in disbelief. Aisha whispered. She jumped onto the ship. Marcus shook his head slowly. That's not the crazy part. He pointed upward. She brought a spear. The alien who learned from humans. The cannon array was still charging when Verexil reached the main energy conduit. Blue light surged through thick armored cables feeding the weapon system. Under normal conditions, it would have been impossible to destroy. But nothing about this moment was normal. The neural disruption had thrown the ship's systems into confusion. Safety locks were flickering on and off. Verexil raised the broken spear. Then she remembered something she had seen earlier. A human mechanic repairing a damaged turret. Instead of attacking the strongest part of the machine, the human had targeted the smallest weak point. Efficiency. Leverage. Creative destruction. Verexil smiled slightly. Humans, she murmured. Then she drove the spear into the narrow joint where two energy conduits crossed. The sky breaks. The result was immediate. Energy surged backward through the cannon network. Inside the warship, alarms screamed. Crew members shouted in panic as power systems overloaded. The annihilation cannons flickered wildly. Then the entire weapon array exploded in a blinding cascade of blue light. The shockwave rolled across the sky like a thunderstorm made of stars. Down on Aelio's ridge, Marcus shielded his eyes. When the light faded, the warship was still there, but its main weapons were gone. Smoke poured from the damaged hull, and on its underside, a single small figure clung to the metal surface. Aisha exhaled slowly. Remind me never to fight that woman. Marcus laughed. Too late. We already did. A new beginning. Minutes later, the warship retreated. Without its weapons and with its commander defeated, The remaining Zerati forces had no choice. Their empire had expected a quick victory. Instead, they had witnessed something far more dangerous. Humans. Thinking. Adapting. Winning. When Verexil finally climbed down from the ridge, the battlefield was quiet. Marcus walked toward her. "So," he said, "what happens now?" Verexil looked across the valley. At the human soldiers helping each other. At the damaged machines being repaired already. At Navarro excitedly explaining the disruptor to anyone who would listen. Then she gave a small nod. "Now," she said, "your species becomes very interesting to the galaxy." Marcus smirked. "We usually do." Verexil looked toward the horizon where the Zerati fleet had vanished. "For centuries, my people believed strength meant domination." She paused. "But today..." Her silver eyes met Marcus's. "Humans proved something better." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Verexil smiled. "That the most dangerous force in the universe." She glanced at the broken warship above them. "Is a creative mind that refuses to surrender." The war for Talvira was far from over. But across the stars, whispers had already begun spreading. Not about Zerati power, but about humanity. The species that should have lost. The species that turned chaos into strategy. The species that an alien champion had chosen to stand beside. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, other civilizations were beginning to realize something important. If humans kept thinking the way they did, the future might belong to them.